All right. Some wind on it. Okay. All right. Good evening. How are we? Good, good. Doing very well. Good to see you. Glad y'all are all here. Some announcements, reminders, updates, things going on, things coming up. The first one is the Christmas banquet, which is coming up not this Sunday, but the next, the 21st. That's in the evening. And if you remember, it's that we do there are two separate but related events. The first one is the banquet, and that one you have to sign up for and pay for. And that meets at 5:30 in the FLC. And then the worship service is at 7 in here. And that part's free for anyone. You don't have to sign up. You just show up. So if you've not signed up, Sunday is the deadline for the banquet. So be mindful of that. If you want to be a part of that, that's the deadline. And it's a hard deadline that we don't set ourselves. It's the caterers. They have to know how many to prepare for. So that's why we have that deadline. Next Wednesday's meeting time, we'll still meet like we normally do, but we'll meet in a different place because the kiddos getting ready for the worship service at Christmas. They will be practicing in here during our usual hour, and so we will meet in this classroom down the hall like we do. So come like normal, same time as always. We'll just be in a different spot. Also next week is our end of year business meeting. Where we will also be discussing, if you have questions, and voting on the proposed budget for next year. And so if you still haven't gotten a copy and you want one, they are out on the table in the foyer. And if you have questions, you can reach out between now and next Wednesday, or just come next Wednesday and we can discuss it. Also, a reminder, this is the season for the Lottie Moon mission offering for international missions. So if you want to give towards that, you can do that online. There's a giving option in the drop-down menu. Or you can just mark that on your check or on the envelope if you give that way. So mindful of that. And then also we want to let people know, speaking of missions, coming up next year, so you got a little while to be thinking, but there's a lot that goes into it before we go. Our 2 mission trips that we've been taking each summer the last several years. First one to Honduras is June 1 through 6 this year, so it's earlier in the summer. And then the one that we send to Hungary is June 24th through July 5th. It's about the same time as it normally is. And so if you're interested in either of those, be thinking and praying about that. Or if you're someone who knows you can't go but wants to support those who do go, there's some options about how you might do that as well. So be thinking and praying about those things. Okay. I think that's it. Unless y'all got another announcement. Y'all got an announcement? Circle K. Circle K. We're just bringing in. I actually really like Circle K, but no, it's Babes. Babes is catering. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it's sushi. Yeah. So come, and then we all see how long it takes to get sick. Just kidding. Yeah, it's Babes. Good question. All right. 1 Timothy 5, as we are making our way slowly through this excellent letter. We'll be in verses 1 and 2 tonight because there's plenty here. And I'm going to give us a quick recap of where we've been to kind of get us up to speed, because we forget from week to week, but it also, repetition helps us remember. So by way of group quiz, who wrote this letter? Paul. Who did he write it to? That's the easiest one. His name's on it. To Timothy. And who was Timothy in relation to Paul? Spiritual son. Paul was his mentor, spiritual father. They were very close and very affectionate. So it's not just like his protege, which is part of it. Paul is raising up Timothy and Titus, similarly, in the ministry and training and equipping and supporting and encouraging them. But then also more deeply than that, they were very, very close. And so Paul has been a big part of Timothy's life. Timothy's been a big part of Paul's life. And so they're close. And Paul is writing this letter to Timothy. Why? What was the occasion? Get his stuff together. What does that mean? Or help the church in Ephesus get their act together, right? That's right, yeah. So Timothy was fine. Timothy was a young man. He was a young pastor. And Paul had stationed him, had kind of appointed him to serve in Ephesus. Why? What was going on in Ephesus? We said there's 2 main big purposes of this letter. Do you remember what they are? Dealing with false teaching, false teachers, and how those two go hand in hand. So not just the content of what they were teaching, which was erroneous and harmful. You need to correct that. But then also the way in which they were living was problematic too. So deal with the false teaching and false teachers and the chaos and the disruption that they're causing. And then relatedly, restore church order and unity and structure. And so Paul has been doing that. So chapter by chapter, I'm just giving a really brief overview. Chapter 1, Paul gives some opening instructions about how to deal with those false teachers. If you remember, throughout the letter, he will give some insight to us about like a particular false teaching. So we have that at the beginning of chapter 4. But more than that, Paul knew that Timothy and the people knew what the issue was. And so Paul doesn't spend all his time refuting the false teaching itself. That's part of it. He instructs Timothy to take care of it and trusts Timothy to take care of all those details. But a lot of what Paul is doing is shaping Timothy's understanding of what it means to be a godly leader and a godly teacher. And it wasn't just for Timothy to hear. We've been saying this is a personal letter to Timothy, but it wasn't a private one. He was to share this with the church community, and we get to be blessed by it today as well. And so chapter 1, Paul's dealing with false teachers and false teaching, and he tells Timothy what's really important is godly character and the power of the gospel. Chapter 2, Paul moves into a section where he addresses some particular matters of worship and church order, and he talks about specific examples that Timothy and their church community would have been very aware of. So he talks about some issues that the men were having, and Paul has a correction for that. He has some issues that the women in particular were dealing with, and Paul has a correction for that because his desire and hope is not chaos and not dysfunction and disorder and not, hey, everybody do what you think is best. But no, there is a right way to do things. And when we gather together as God's people, there needs to be structure and order for everyone's good. And so Timothy's put in place to help provide that structure and let people know this is the way to do things. Chapter 3, then he turns his focus, Paul, on church leadership, and he gives qualifications for elders, so pastors, those like in official, formal leadership roles, and then also deacons, who are like the lead helpers, lead servants. And if you remember when we covered that in chapter 3, we said it's really interesting. What does Paul highlight in the requirements for both? What does he focus most on? Character. So he doesn't give a list of duties. He does for elders, for pastors. They need to be able to teach. But outside of that, Paul, there's a lot of things that he could have said about specific jobs and tasks and duties and responsibilities, and all that matters. But here, what those people needed most were godly leaders with godly character. So that's what he's highlighting, both for the pastors and the deacons as well. And so, again, this is for Timothy to know. This is for Timothy to put in place, but then the whole church community to be mindful of and to follow for their own good, but then also for the good of those around who are watching, so for their witness as well. Because if non-believers are watching these Christians just run amok and be chaotic and be dysfunctional and be fighting and look just like everyone else, that doesn't bode well. That's not a good witness. Question? Prior to Paul becoming an apostle? I don't think so. I don't know the exact timeline. We see some in 2 Timothy. He talks a little bit about their background. In the book of Acts, there's some too. Paul was much older than Timothy, so I don't know how he met, but also from what Paul says in other letters, he knew Timothy's mom and grandmother. And so there was some connection to the Christian community, and I can't remember exactly where, but I don't know if we know an exact starting point. But then Timothy kind of starts showing up in Scripture. So I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll look into that. Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, then chapter 4. We moved into chapter 4 the last couple of weeks. Paul returns to the issue of false teachers and how to handle them. The beginning of chapter 4, he recognizes and he points out and kind of warns that some people might have been interested and even considered themselves Christians, but will fall away. They'll chase after false teaching and be led astray. And so he's warning Timothy in advance, this is going to happen, but your job is to be faithful. And there in the beginning of chapter 4, Paul does touch on a particular false teaching and refutes it. This is the wrong idea. This is the right idea. But then the rest of chapter 4, what we spent the last several weeks focusing on is what Timothy was supposed to do about it in terms of how is he supposed to live. And the big emphasis that we kept hitting on over and over and over again is, Timothy, your job is to be faithful. Your job is to not fight every single fight, not get into every single controversy, not get distracted by those things. Those things matter, but you need to use wisdom. And the main point is to stay focused on who you are and who you've been called to be in this place. And so focus on preaching God's word, focus on God's people reading God's word together, focus on the essentials, and then the other things will start working themselves out as you stay focused on where you're going. Now, using Christian wisdom, sometimes there will be roadblocks in the way as you're trying to be faithful, and you'll need to deal with that particular false teaching or that particular person causing a problem. But that is never to be your primary focus of always trying to put out every single fire. Instead, Paul keeps saying, be a person of godly character. Be faithful to your mission. Be faithful to who God has called you to be and what he's called you to do in this place. And then he will lead and equip and empower you to do everything that you need to do. Timothy, your job is not to be responsible for results. Your job is to be faithful and to trust God to do what God does. And so this is what keeps coming up over and over and over. And then last week, Paul adds to that and says, don't let anyone really look down on you because of your age, because you don't have to wait to get a certain age to be faithful. He said right here, right now, you be as faithful as you can to Jesus, and then watch how God uses that faithfulness to bear witness, to bless the people in the church, and then to bear witness to those who are watching. Okay, now, chapter 5, Paul is going to give some more practical advice on how Timothy should handle those in his church. Because let's be honest, people are difficult, all of us. None of us is perfect, right? And so put enough of us together, we're going to have some tension. There's going to be some issues. We already knew going into it that church had plenty of issues. And then sending someone in to clean things up, as Scott says, get their act together, would have been uncomfortable regardless. But sending in someone who was young, we recognized, as Paul said at the end of the last chapter, that provides some new wrinkles as well. And so Timothy needed to learn people skills, pastor skills, how to know the truth, preach the truth, uphold the truth, absolutely, but also how do you do it in a way that shepherds your people? Because there's a difference, as we said last week, between leadership and lordship. Pastors are not called to lord over their people. They are called to shepherd them, to serve them, to lead them in that way that is Christ-like. So Paul is going to give young Timothy some really practical insight on how to navigate different people within his church community when it comes to correction. So let's read our passage, and then I have something we're going to talk about first, and then we'll look at each category of person that Paul mentions here. So if someone could read out loud for us, 1 Timothy 5, 1 through 2, 1 and 2. Okay, so what are the 4 categories of people that Timothy is going to encounter? Older men, younger men, these are very easy categories. What's next? Older women, and then to round it out, younger women. Okay, that covers everybody. So we're going to go into much more detail than Paul does here to help kind of tease it out. But before we get into each of these categories and the different kind of nuances that are going to be in place, the different relational dynamics in place, and I'm going to share some personal examples and stories too. But before we get into that, I want to ask a couple of questions. Do you talk to, for those of you who are married, do you talk to your spouse the same way that you talk to your kids? No, okay. Do you talk to your spouse or your kids the same way that you might talk to your best friend? Or to a neighbor, or to a boss, or to a stranger at the store? No, each of these people we talk to in different ways. Why? The relationship is different. There are different factors, and that's not being disingenuous, that's not being hypocritical or two-faced. I talk to Deanna, my wife, very differently than I talk to my children. And I talk to both of them differently than I talk to y'all. And I talk to y'all differently than I talk to the neighbor that I've only ever waved to. Do you know what I'm talking about? So the relationship can impact how you then communicate. And so we all know this intuitively, inherently. This is how we navigate life. There are a lot of different factors that we consider that go into both what we share with someone and how we share it, right? So the age of the person factors into it. If it's a man or a woman factors into it. Time and place, context. Certain things we might talk about. Sunday morning, actually, so my son, whom I adore, turns to me during worship and asks a great question. And I was like, now is not the time or the place to talk about it. He was not wrong. It was not inappropriate. But I'm like, hey, right now, we're doing this thing. We're worshiping. We'll talk about that if you want to talk about that. But let's save that great question for when we get home. Was he in trouble? Was he bad? No, it's just time and place. Time and place matter, right? So there's all these different things that factor into it. And so we consider these things, and someone that can navigate that well, that knows time and place, that can be sensitive to all these different factors, usually excels in communication, right? Now think about this. Someone, maybe you know people like this, maybe you've worked with people like this, someone can be highly skilled or competent at a given task or a job, but are terrible with other people. How does that usually go? Not well. It can be very frustrating. And we know in our day and age, if they're good enough, they can probably get pretty far, which is frustrating in its own sense. But unless you work alone, you need to also develop some people skills. You need to learn how to talk to other people. If you have a boss, you need to learn how to listen, how to respond to instruction or correction, right? If you are a boss and you're over people, you need to learn how to talk to them and how to lead and to guide them differently. Let me ask you this question. How many of you that have kids, how many of you have kids? Let's go here. How many of you have more than one kid? Okay. For those of you that have kids and have more than one kid, are all your kids the exact same? Do they have the same personality? Do they respond to the same type of motivation the same way? They're not, right? And so I'm at home with my two kids. One's a boy, one's a girl. One's 9, one's 4. So there's already differences there. But just personality and demeanor, and they are just very different beings. And so when I am being a father in the home, I talk to them differently. I enforce rules or I offer correction differently, not because I favor one over the other, but because they're different and they respond differently. You know what I'm talking about? This is life. This is working with people. If we don't recognize this, we can run ourselves into a whole lot of problems, right? So what I'm trying to say is social awareness, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, all these things matter. Let me ask you this question. How many of you have ever, you don't have to raise hands or name names, have ever known someone who was a grown-up biologically, but not a grown-up emotionally? You ever known any grown children? Yeah, who might be an adult, but they aren't mature like an adult. They can't handle their emotions well, or they can't communicate well, right? We all recognize that, and that causes problems if they have not continued to mature, right? So let me ask you this question now. This is all going somewhere here in a second. What do you think ultimately is a pastor's job? Do what? Lead his flock, right. Now, there are specific tasks. That's it exactly. There are specific tasks and duties, preaching, teaching, counsel, comfort, visit. Like there's things to do, right, that are very good and very, very important. And there's like a handful of them that you're going to do no matter what, no matter where you are, okay? But that aside, the bigger picture is a pastor is to shepherd. I mean, that's where the name comes from, to take care of his flock, take care of the people that the Lord has entrusted to him. And so the point that I've learned, the point that Timothy was learning, is that you are in your place, yes, to do certain things. And in this situation, he had some really hard conversations he had to do, certain hard responsibilities and things he had to put in place and then uphold. And that was very, very important, but all within the context of you are here to use your position and authority for the good of your people. You are to take care of your flock because they're not really your flock. Peter talks about this in 1 Peter 5, talking about essentially having the right mind and the right heart for leadership if you're going to be a pastor. And so actually, will someone go there? I want us to hear it. 1 Peter 5, read 1 through 5. If someone can flip over to that real quick. Yes, 1 Peter 5, 1 through 5. Shepherd the flock of who? Whose people are they? They're God's, ultimately. Okay, sorry, keep going. Okay, so Peter's talking to different people about different stuff, but it applies to what Timothy was going through. It applies what we might go through here. Any pastor anywhere, they're not your people. In one sense, they are. In one sense, you're mine and I am yours. We're here together. But in the grander sense, you belong to God. Like I am a shepherd, lowercase s, but Peter says there is a chief shepherd who's over you that you are responsible to. Timothy, you are responsible to these people to a degree, but ultimately you are responsible to God. And so work as if you were working unto the Lord, as Paul says elsewhere, right? So make sure you have the right heart. Make sure you have the right motivation. No one should be forcing you to do these things, and you're in the wrong position. You're in the wrong job. And you shouldn't be in this position of leadership if you're going to use it manipulatively or to exploit people for your own gain. This is problematic. God will hold you accountable to this. Instead, with an open heart and an open conscience and open hands before the Lord, you bless God's people because they're his people. All of you, Peter says, should be exercising humility, not just you with me, but me with you with me, us with each other. So we see here that's the role. All that to say, an unofficial motto of mine has become the people are the ministry. There are a lot of things I do as a job that I love, that are good and important, but they matter because I'm doing them with you. I'm not preaching to myself in an empty room. I'm not just preaching to, the the void of the internet. I'm preaching to real human beings that God made and God cares and God has plans for, right? The people are the ministry. And so Paul is reminding Timothy, it's really easy to get lost in the job that you have, the tasks that are before you, as good as important they are, but don't be distracted by that. The people are the ministry. God has called you to shepherd his flock here. Does that make sense? That is so important. So what that means then, Timothy, Aaron, other pastors, it does not matter. This is a conviction of mine. It does not matter. It does not matter if you are a fantastic preacher, if you are a jerk to your people. Actually, it does matter. I think that's a problem. And I think God will hold you accountable. It doesn't matter if you are skilled and eloquent, of a communicator, even if you're saying good, true, important things, great. But if you are a jerk to your people, if you're not loving and shepherding and pastoring your people, that's a very real problem. What has Paul continued to hammer home with Timothy? Character, character, character. Yes, know the truth, uphold the truth, teach the truth, preach the truth, establish the truth. All that really, really, really matters. No one's saying it doesn't. But if you aren't a person of character, then you're wasting the position that God has put you in, and God will hold you accountable. Do we see this? So we want to make sure that this is in place. It's not enough, young Timothy, young whoever, to know all the right theological facts, put together really, solid theological sermons and teachings if you can't love your people. There's a disconnect there that I believe God cares about. So it's not just about buildings and budgets and systems and sermons. It's about the people God has called you to love and to serve and to live with. So a pastor, first and foremost, is to be humble, is to be a servant, is to be a shepherd, to care for the good of the flock. Now, within that, related, just because someone has been placed in a position of authority doesn't mean that they will automatically know how to use that well, right? Again, all of us can think of examples of someone that was in a position of authority over us who was just mean or a jerk or arrogant or maybe incompetent, and we're not sure how they got in that position or why they got paid what they got or whatever it might be. We all know examples of that, right? And we struggle with that. Like there's tension there. And so Paul is reminding Timothy that these things matter. One last comment, and then we'll get into each of these. If you make a relationship of any sort, if you make a relationship all about power dynamics, who's in charge? Who wins? Who gets their way? Who's right? Who comes out on top? If you make your relationship all about power dynamics, how do you think that relationship's going to go? It's not going to be much of one, right? Even if you win, I do this when I do premarital counseling. I hammer this home every single session that we have. I make sure they remember you are a team, you are a team, you are a team. You are better together. If you get in a fight and one of you wins, you've both lost because you're in this together. If you go into relationships with a power mindset of who's the boss, who's in charge, who gets to win, how does Jesus put it? Matthew 26. I think it's Matthew 26. Where is it in my notes? Matthew 26:52. Those who live by the sword, what? Die by the sword. If you want to fight, then you'll get a fight. If you want to live a life of always fighting for dominance, then you are always going to be fighting for dominance. It's going to be a life of turmoil and stress and strain and tension. And so Paul is telling young Timothy, when you're dealing with human beings that God created and God loves and has given to you to love and to serve, do not approach them heavy-handedly. Don't approach them flippantly. Don't approach them arrogantly. Approach them like a shepherd. It's not about power dynamics. It's about the truth of the gospel and the truth of God's love in you and then through you, right? So Timothy, you need people skills. You need emotional intelligence. You need to know how to navigate relationships well. Otherwise, you might be saying lots of good things, but it's not going to land, right? Okay. Are we all on board with that? Now, he's going to give a lot of practical stuff, and we're going to talk practical stuff tonight that fits our culture. I want us to be mindful, though, of this might play out. The principle will be universal, but the implications, the applications of it might play out differently from culture to culture, right? So how we show respect in our culture, for example, looks one way. How Christians in China or Uganda or wherever else, how Christians show respect in that culture might look a little different, but the bottom line is, are you showing respect? Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. All right, let's look. Melissa, will you read 1 Timothy 5, verse 1 again? Let's talk about older men. Okay, so older men says, do not rebuke. I think that the do not rebuke is kind of like is the main idea across these four categories. So I'm going to put this at the top here. But this is not it by itself, because the point is don't rebuke, because why was Timothy sent there? To do a lot of rebuking, actually, to do a lot of correcting, to confront, to expose falsehood and corruption and disruption, and to replace it with the truth of God's word. So he's going to have a lot of hard conversations and a lot of hard situations. So the issue, Paul's not saying avoid hard things. He says learn how to do it the right way. So my translation, ESV, says don't rebuke. Some of y'all might have do not speak harshly. Does anyone have that? Or do y'all have something different there? Don't rebuke sharply, harshly. What's the point that Paul's getting across here? Be respectful. So instead of rebuking in a tone that is aggressive, that is, maybe embarrassing or humiliating or arrogant or whatever, say the hard things that need to be said, but then how does he say to do it? Don't rebuke an older man, but what? Encourage, my translation says. Does anyone else have something different there? Entreat? Does anyone have exhort or appeal to? So what's the difference? What line is Paul telling Timothy to take with older men? Do it respectfully. Reason. Engage. Approach. Right? Connect. Again, don't shy away from the truth, but learn how to communicate it in a way for the good of this whole person. Because he says, don't just treat them like the bad guy. Don't treat them like the enemy. Don't treat them like whatever. Instead, he says, treat them like what? Like a father. What does that mean? Okay, so a figure of authority who deserves, by God's design for human relationships, respect, honor, dignity. Good. But also, father is a relational term. Engage this person as if you care about them, Engage this person like they matter. Engage this person not like they're some distant stranger, but as if they're in your family. Engage this person with a personal touch. Do we see how that's different? It's really easy, and we know in our day and age, we deal with it in a way that Timothy didn't with the internet. It's really easy to spout off all sorts of stuff online because we're not in front of them and we don't know them, and we can be mad at whoever we want and we can say all sorts of things, right? But Paul says, no, you don't have that distance with these people. Treat older men who need to be corrected, correct them, but do it in a way that is respectful, do it in a way that is appropriate, do it in a way that is encouraging, that's uplifting, that builds them up and doesn't just unnecessarily tear them down. Do it in a way that's not combative or competitive. Do you see what I'm saying? There's such a difference there. Why would Timothy need to hear this? I mean, Timothy's a Christian. He knows he's supposed to love everyone. But why would he need Paul to spell it out like this for him? What do you think? So he's a younger man. Tell me more about that. What do young men often do? Okay, maybe roll your eyes. What else? Maybe they think, yeah. Maybe we think we know more than we really do. Yeah, what else? There's lack of maturity, arrogance, a desire to prove themselves. When do you become an older man? I think that varies from church to church, culture to culture, era to era. I don't think Paul puts a number on it. I'll tell you, Timothy, what does he say? Anyone older than you counts. It's relative. It's relative not in the sense of like, hey, anything goes, but like, listen, and this is the easiest category. Timothy's not like, well, give me a number, Paul. He says, are they older than you? Well, yeah, cool. Treat them with respect. Define codger. I'm actually about to go there next, but yeah, tell me about that. Huh? Okay, so define for the class, what is an old codger? What does that mean? Yeah, a grumpy? Yeah, I don't think you're a codger, but... So my question was going to be this. Paul tells Timothy, hey, the people in your church, that are the men in your church that are older than you need to approach them with respect. You need to honor their dignity. You need to show them like proper, respect. Be kind, be supportive, be loving, respectful. All these things. Don't be arrogant. Don't be demanding. Don't be combative. Don't bow up. Don't try to fight. All these kind of things. But the question I want to ask is, what if they don't deserve it? What if they aren't those things to you, Timothy? What's he supposed to do? Yeah, it doesn't matter, we covered this last week, what they say or do, because you are not responsible for their behavior. You're responsible for you and what God has called you to do. So you be faithful, and you, Timothy, you Christian, me, you are responsible to do what God has called you to do. My behavior is not based on or determined by yours. I'm called to do what God has called me to do, whether you respond well or not. Can I give you an example from my life? I told you a little bit about it last week. I told you about at my former church, there was a gentleman who was not a gentleman. And this was a really fun lesson for me to walk through and to be humbled by, because as I told y'all some, I got into it last week. I didn't tell you how it ended. I'll tell you how it ended tonight. But he was mean. Like, not just like, he's an old kind of grumpy guy, rough around the edges, but he's a sweetheart. No, he was mean on every edge and inside and out, and everyone knew it at his former church, at our church. He was a bully. He was mean, and he enjoyed it. It was awful. And so I would wrestle with this guy who was so terrible to directly call me up to tell me how bad of a job he thought I was doing. I mean, this awful stuff, right? And I would wrestle, what's my job here with this guy? I know I'm not supposed to be mean to him back, but surely there's something I can do. And I would come to this passage, or I'd go to the Gospels, and I would hear Jesus say, love your enemies. And I'd hear Paul say, oh, no, you don't you don't base what you do on what he does. You base what you do on what God has told you to do. And so is he older than you, Aaron? Yeah. Is he in the flock that I've given you? Yeah. Then you know how to treat him with respect, even though he doesn't deserve it, with honor, even though he doesn't deserve it. And if he's low and mean and nasty, that's on him. And you are never to return his behavior with his behavior, right? Because more than just practical pastoral wisdom, which I needed to learn, and I needed to be shaped in these hard ways. What has God done with me? Did God wait for me to get my act together and be good enough for his love and his mercy and his grace? For Christ to come and die for me? No, I was unworthy, wildly unworthy, undeserving, yet he did it anyway. And so when you say it out loud like this, I remember talking to my dad on the phone one day. I was so worked up. I was so mad. And I was like, what is this? What do these people want from me? What is this guy? What am I supposed to do? Just like sacrifice myself? And my dad didn't even say anything. He just waited for it to land. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to love him as Christ loves me and give him grace as Christ gives me grace. Now, within that, I learned that there's a way respectfully to treat this man well, but put healthy boundaries in place so that he doesn't just treat everyone this way, right? There's hard lessons to work there, but my heart and my behavior towards him was always going to be shaped by what God had called me to do. That makes the biggest difference. So let me tell you how the story ends. So he was he was awful in any number of ways, direct, behind my back, all of it, whatever. He one time came into my office and told me that he was trying to get rid of me. He was trying to be mean enough that I would leave. And I'm like, okay, like what do you want me to do with this information? So it was a rocky relationship. But I loved him anyway. And Paul says, doesn't matter your age, you set an example for him. Last week? You set an example in love and faith and purity, all these things, okay? And other people will notice, other people will be blessed. And yes, it's going to be really, really hard, but God can do something. When you are faithful to what God says to do, God knows what he's doing. He knows what he's called you to. He will sustain you, but also he'll do things that you never knew were possible. So fast forward, the man got older and older and older and older. His health began to deteriorate, and he had lived his life in such a rotten way that he had burned every bridge in his life with his family, with friends. It was very, very sad. Get to the end of his life, and I get a call. He's on his deathbed. Okay, let me go find him. Let me go see him. And so I went at the end of his life, and I went and saw him as he's dying, and because of this. Because of this and what God does when we are faithful, when we are open, even when it's hard and we don't want to and the other person doesn't deserve it. But we say, God, I know you will help and I know your way is best. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be faithful. Guess what God did? He changed my heart. And as on this man's deathbed, I got to stand in the hospital room, the hospice room, and I looked him in the eye sincerely, and I was able to tell him, I love you. Do you know I love you? As your pastor? And guess what he said? He said, I love you too. That wasn't my plan. That's not how I would have handled it if I had done what I thought was right and what I wanted to do and what I deserved to do and what no one would have blamed me for doing, but instead trusting that God knows what he's doing, treating this man like a father, even though he was mean and all these terrible things, but showing him the love of Christ and the grace of Christ and the peace and the mercy that comes from God's Spirit, changed my heart and repaired a relationship. Even if it was at the very, very end, we could say these things to him. Do you see? That's so different. That's so different than what a lot of us want to do. With that, I need to move on. I got a little bogged down there with that personal story. With that, I think a lot of pastors, young men pastors especially, have this can sound weird, but daddy issues, have authority issues. And so they get put in positions that are bigger than their character can keep up with. And then they don't know how to use authority because they've never known how to respond to authority. And they hurt people. And they get around people who aren't good. They get around church members who are messy, who are broken, who need a Christ-like shepherd, and yet these are boys, and they don't know how to handle authority or respond to authority, and they make such a mess. So they need to come to terms with that with themselves so that they can love and serve the way that Christ loves and serves, right? So older men, don't just crush them, don't embarrass them, don't put them in their place, don't bow up, don't fight them in that sense. Instead, you encourage, you appeal, you exhort, you tell them the truth, you bring correction, you have the hard conversations, but you do it with a personal, loving, humble, respectful approach. And then you trust God with the results. Because they may not like it, and they may leave your church, or they may talk about you behind your back, or whatever else, but you're responsible to God, and you can trust that God knows what he's doing. Okay, next. So younger men, that's how you treat older men. What does he say how to treat younger men? Brothers, you're still on older men? Do you have a question or a comment? What's up? Well, let me follow that. How is an older man in a congregation supposed to treat a leader who's younger than them who doesn't show them respect? Ooh, good question. What do you think? Is this like, do you have a certain leader in mind that maybe we need to have a conversation? Maybe I need to apologize about something? No. This is a good question. But what do you have in mind? What do you think? What do you think? So say, for example, and I hope this is a hypothetical and not real, older church member, younger pastor than you, say, for example, I am disrespectful or a jerk. Okay. So, but how do you think, if that was the case here, what do you think the call would be? What should you do? That is an approach. That is one approach, yeah. He said go behind closed doors and have it out. Go to them. That's Matthew 18. Like talk one-on-one. Hopefully the church has other leaders that you can go and talk to. We have deacons here. We have other staff. We have a personnel committee. Hopefully there are avenues. Sometimes churches are dysfunctional. Sure. So different churches are structured differently, and there's no perfect church, and there's no perfect church system or structure. Sometimes, unfortunately, this is just a fact of life. Sometimes churches are dysfunctional, and their leadership is dysfunctional, and there is not a pathway to hold leadership accountable. I think that's a separate issue. That's kind of like the reverse issue of what Paul's talking about here with Timothy coming in and make sure you set up healthy leadership structure. But I would suggest if someone was at a church like that, with leaders like that, if you have made in good faith efforts to speak to it, to address it, to work through it, and they shut it down or they avoid it, I would suggest you find a different church because that's not going to be a healthy environment is what I would say. But you would be responsible for how you behave because you are accountable to God. Yeah, that's messy though. And do it in love. Yeah, and hope. Yeah. Yeah. With which part? Okay. No. Yeah. No, I hear that. But what I'm saying is if you're in a church and you have made efforts to address it, and they do not respond, and they do not respond, and they do not respond, and you've asked, you've engaged, you've taken them aside, you've brought others with you, you've done everything you can faithfully to address it, and they still don't respond, I say at that point, you're wasting your time. I would heartbreakingly go find another church. Yeah. No, I think you and I are on the same page. I don't think I'll come to you in a second. I don't think you have to just sit there and take it. Nobody wins. Yeah. And I think a lot of times in churches, people unnecessarily just sit there and take things or unnecessarily let leadership do terrible things because they don't know what to do or they're trying to be respectful, but they don't know what that looks like. And often it kind of perpetuates broken systems and relationships. Yeah, it's messy. Yes, sir? Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes I think, and that's a case by case with question of personal wisdom and what God calls. He said sometimes it might be the case where someone's at a dysfunctional church, but God has called them to stay and to be a light and to make a difference. Absolutely, sometimes, and that's really tricky and hard too. But trusting God on how you navigate that can be really hard. Let's do another one or two of these, and then we gotta go do prayer time. So younger men, treat them as brothers. So what does that mean? What do you think? Don't look down on them. These are your peers, brothers in a good sense, and like, Hey, they're there with you, not brothers in the sense that like we're going to fight and be terrible to each other or whatever. Not that kind of sibling kind of brotherhood, but the brotherhood that we talk about of like closeness and connection. And I'm here for you and you're here for me, and I strengthen you and you strengthen me, and I challenge you and you challenge me. There's going to be some overlap in terms of humility, of not lording over them, of not being domineering or competitive or hurtful. But there's also going to be a distinction, because how you treat a father with respect is different than how you might treat a brother with respect. I talk to people who are my age, or who are my friends, differently than I talk to someone who's older than me. I thought of an example. So Sid's not here tonight. Sid Brock, our fantastic deacon and life group leader and drummer. I have no problem calling Sid dude. I will never call Ronnie Woldridge dude, right? The way, and that's not right or wrong, it's different, right? The way I talk to Ronnie is different, and it can be full of love and personable, and like we do have a healthy relationship, and I really, really look up to you, and it's a meaningful, it's not like a false kind of distance, formality, it's respect. I love Sid, but I'm talking to Sid differently. So the way that I would engage Sid or someone younger than me isn't as their pastor who knows everything and I'm over them. I am over them. I'm responsible for them, but I'm their brother. And I tell this with people that I counsel, if they're my age or younger. I tell them that on the front end. I'm not your dad. I'm not your God. I don't know everything. Consider me an older brother who's a little further down the road. And here's the wisdom that I might have to share. And I do have some authority. And I do have some training and background. I'm in this position for a reason, but I'm here with you. That's what a brother does, right? Do we see that? So there's still a humility there. There's grace there. Depending on the relationship, though, you can maybe be more direct with a brother. I have some of my best friends are like brothers to me. And the ways that we can talk to each other, because we have that relationship, is much more direct and stronger than maybe the ways that we would talk to other people. But it's within the healthy relationship that we've developed. So that's what Paul's saying here. All right, older women. How is he supposed to treat them? So treat them like mothers. So what does that mean? So Paul gave an example. Be kind and courteous. Open doors for them. Absolutely. What else? What else does it mean to treat an older woman like a mother? Again, respect with dignity, right? Listen to her. What else do you think it means? Okay, listen to her and her wisdom. Notice her. Don't just push her to the side because she's a woman or an older woman. Don't write her off. Don't make fun of her. Don't belittle her. Oh, just old women, they don't know. No, like how is that fruitful? How's that helpful? Who does that bless? If you're cutting these women off, that you're not loving and serving them by making fun of them or just pushing them to the side. No, listen, love, care, serve, assist. Treat them like your mother in a good way, right? Right. But Paul says, Timothy, you don't get to write anyone off, right? You treat them with dignity, with respect, with care, with concern, with affection, right? Okay, good. Last one. Younger women like what? Sisters. So what does that mean? What might that look like? Do what? Protective. Good. Protective of what? Their dignity, their character, their honor, their name. Yeah. Sometimes physically protective if you need to be. Yeah. Let me ask you this question. The world we live in today is very different, but so similar to the world Timothy lived in. How are young women in particular often treated? Not well, right? They are used. They're treated as objects. They are over-sexualized. They're taken advantage of. They are attacked. All sorts of. It's hard. Timothy, you act like these women matter to you because they matter to God, because both those things should be true. You act like these women are human beings made in the image of God, who Christ loves and died for. You treat these women in your church who are younger than you like your sisters. You are to care for them. You are to guard them. You are to support them. You are to listen to them. It is much easier for me to relate to a young man or a man my age because that's what I am. I know how I think, how we think. We share similar experiences. This is really easy. This one's harder. Timothy, do the work. Listen, talk. Do what is good and right and appropriate by them. We're talking about healthy relationships, healthy boundaries at all these levels. If you have authority issues, Timothy, work it out so you can treat these men appropriately. If you have mother issues, Timothy, work it out. Young pastors, work it out so you can treat these mothers well. If you have women issues, you need to work it out. If you're going to be in a position where you are their pastor to shepherd and care for their souls, you need to understand what it means to love and to serve them as a brother, as if they are a sister to you, right? So, in one sense, we're going to do a lot of the similar things, no matter who it is. But in another sense, we're going to be very sensitive and mindful to the differences, to the background, to the history, to the relationship, right? Let me give you a really practical example. I like to, as our church is getting bigger, it's getting harder, but I still think it's really important to be available. So if you ever want to meet with me or to talk, I have to schedule it, but we'll find a time and we'll make it happen. But I try to be very aware of everything. I want to be aware of you and your time and your schedule and your family and your relationships and what's going on in your life. I want to be aware of your character. I want to be aware of, if you meet with me, where are we meeting? When are we meeting? Who knows that we're meeting? I do that for everyone, but especially if I'm meeting with our day and age, and it's not just our day and age, if I'm meeting with a woman who is younger than me, my age or younger, I want to be extra careful for her sake and for mine to do it well. I don't go in scared that she's going to do something or I'm going to do something. No, but I want to be respectful and mindful of my sister. I never want to put her in a position where she's uncomfortable, where she feels scared or timid or overwhelmed. I want to never put her in a position where things might look bad, right? So if you meet here at my office, we have these windows in our doors. I tell Melissa, hey, I'm meeting with so-and-so at this time. The discussion that we have will be private and confidential if it's needed, but it won't be private in the sense that it's hidden. People are going to know that you're here with me when you're here. They're going to know when you leave. I'm going to have them walk by my door. So don't be alarmed. They just want to make sure everyone knows what's going on. Do you see what I'm saying? That's treating with love, with respect, with care, and giving kind of equal opportunity and access to people. So, Timothy, be godly, be mature, be a man of character, and you don't base your character on theirs. You base your character on Christ and who he is and what he's called you to do. Now, let me ask you this final question for now, and we may revisit this next week some. This makes sense on paper, on board. Absolutely. Is this easy to do? Especially if you're having to talk about hard things, right? So what do you think Timothy for sure needs? There's a lot of things that he could benefit from, a lot of wisdom, some practical wisdom, some, just godly wisdom. But what does Timothy have to have no matter what to navigate these things? What do you think? Compassion? Good. Love? Love for others? Absolutely. There's one other thing I'm looking for. Holy Spirit? Oh, for sure. Yeah. In and through all of that. Absolutely. One character trait, humility. Absolutely. Every single person, every single category, every single situation, every single conversation, Timothy, you need to come in this with a spirit of humility, listening to the Spirit of God, motivated by a sense of love and compassion for God's people, and then that, because you're going to face hard people, hard conversations, hard situations, hard things that are too much or too big or you don't know how to do, Timothy. But if you come in with a spirit of humility, dependent on the Spirit of God, motivated by the love of God, you're going to be okay. All right. We did it. We made it. 2 verses. There's a lot there. What else would y'all add, or what other comments or questions do you have tonight? Yeah. Go for what? Yeah, no, I think that's, absolutely. Yeah. How we love, again, there be some cultural aspects of what that might look like in your culture to show respect or to be protective, to guard, to support, to equip, to empower. Yeah, but the baseline is, that's in place. Timothy, shepherd your flock. Okay. Also, my final comment, again, a lot of this is specific, directed to Timothy and his situation, and it definitely applies to me and my situation, but this is for all of God's people to learn from how we navigate different relationships in the church, right? So it's not just for pastors or young pastors. This is for all of God's people. Okay. Good. Let's look at our prayer.